The Tomb of Whispering Shadows. Part 1. The Map and the Curse. The small village of Evershade was a quiet place, nestled between two jagged mountains. But it was here that three adventurers found themselves at the start of an ominous quest. Ilara, a sharp-eyed elven rogue. Folkor, a brooding half-orc barbarian. And Erin, a determined human cleric, had been hired by the village elder to retrieve an ancient artifact, a mysterious gemstone said to be hidden in the Tomb of Whispering Shadows. The tomb had been sealed for centuries, its entrance obscured by time and treachery. No one who had ventured inside had ever returned. The elder handed them a brittle yellowed map. This map is all that remains of those who have tried. The curse of the tomb is real. Beware the whispers. His voice trembled as he spoke, and the adventurers exchanged uneasy glances. Despite the warning, the trio was undeterred. They gathered their supplies and set off at dawn, the towering mountains looming over them. The journey was long and perilous, filled with overgrown paths and chilling winds that seemed to whisper names they couldn't quite understand. When they reached the tomb's entrance, the ground around it was disturbingly silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The stone archway was cracked, and strange symbols lined the walls. Folkor stepped forward, his heavy boots echoing in the hollow air. "This is it," he said, his voice gruff. Erin muttered a prayer, a faint glow emanating from her holy symbol. "We must proceed with caution." Ilara stepped into the tomb first, her keen eyes scanning the dark corridor beyond. The air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to pulse with a low, almost imperceptible hum. As they ventured deeper, the whispers began, a soft, unearthly murmur that slithered through their minds. The words were indistinct, but the dread they carried was undeniable. "We're not alone," Ilara said, her hand on her dagger's hilt. But before they could react, the tomb's door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The Tomb of Whispering Shadows. Part 2. The Shadows Stir. The moment the door closed, an eerie silence filled the tomb. The flickering light from Erin's torch cast long, twisted shadows on the walls, making the ancient carvings appear to writhe. Falkor gripped his axe tightly, his muscles tense. Ilara's eyes darted around, trying to pinpoint the source of the growing unease. "Keep moving," Erin urged, her voice steady but strained. "We need to find the gemstone and get out." They pushed forward, but every step seemed heavier than the last. The deeper they ventured, the stronger the whispers became, now carrying the distinct sound of voices, voices that were not their own. "Do you hear that?" Ilara whispered, her hand instinctively going to her ears, as though trying to block out the noise. The voices were unintelligible at first, but as they pressed on, the words began to sharpen into something more distinct. "Ilara, Falkor, Erin?" The whispers seemed to call their names in a sing-song rhythm, the voices growing in number and urgency. Falkor's breath quickened. "It's just the tomb playing tricks on us," he grunted, his grip tightening on his axe. But Ilara wasn't convinced. She stopped in her tracks, her senses alert. Something isn't right. As they advanced, the walls of the tomb seemed to shift. The carvings, once static and lifeless, now seemed to change with each glance, their eyes following the adventurers. The temperature dropped, and a heavy, oppressive weight settled over them. "I think it's too late," Erin whispered, her voice tinged with fear. "The tomb, it wants us." Before they could react, a shadow detached itself from the wall, a shape more like smoke than flesh, and lunged at them. The Tomb of Whispering Shadows. Part 3. The Final Whisper. The shadow was upon them in an instant, its form coalescing into a grotesque, humanoid figure, with hollow eyes that seemed to suck in the very light. It moved with unnatural speed, its whispers now a cacophony of anguished cries. Erin raised her holy symbol, channeling divine energy, but the shadow recoiled, hissing as if burned. Falkor swung his axe, but it passed through the shadow as though it were made of mist. Elara quickly ducked forward, trying to find a weakness in the creature's form. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to fill her mind entirely. Elara! The voice was unmistakable. Her mother's voice, calling her from the depths of the tomb. Elara, come closer. Her heart pounded, the pull of the voice almost unbearable. No! She shouted, shaking her head, trying to clear the confusion. Falkor stepped between her and the shadow. Focus, Elara! It's a trick! The shadow hissed and lunged again. But this time, Falkor's axe cleaved through it, dispersing the mist temporarily. They didn't have much time. The tomb was closing in on them, and the whispers were growing deafening. Back to the entrance, Erin shouted, her eyes wide with terror. We need to escape now. With no other choice, the trio ran. The tomb seemed to shift around them, doors slamming shut, paths twisting. But the whispers followed, relentless and overwhelming. Elara felt the pull of the tomb's curse. Its shadows seemed to claw at her soul, threatening to drag her back into the darkness. Finally, they reached the door, but it wouldn't budge. The shadow reappeared, now larger and more terrifying, its form shifting and changing with every heartbeat. With one last desperate push, Falkor threw himself at the door, using all his strength to force it open. The tomb howled in fury as they tumbled out into the cold night air, the whispers fading into the distance. Breathing heavily, they looked at one another. Exhausted, shaken, but alive. They had escaped. But the echoes of the tomb of whispering shadows would follow them forever. The gemstone was never found, but the curse had claimed its due. 3 souls forever marked by its whispers.